Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire. Sorry it's been a while since I've had a video. We decided to spend some time with my father-in-law after losing our mother-in-law in June, and it's been a wonderful few weeks. But today I'm back with another video, and this time it's a surprise gatefold card design. I will be demonstrating this technique with layering dies because I'm a big fan of them. However, if you don't have layering dies or fancy dies, keep in mind throughout this video that these techniques can be done with basic die shapes or even trace and cut shapes or punch shapes. So just keep that in your mind as you watch me demonstrate the technique. Let's start with this example here. For this card and many of the other cards in this video, I will be using this Birch Press Ornament Basics die set. It includes all the dies that you see on the right, which has a basic ornament shape. Then there are two different toppers and then several other layering pieces that you can add to create a fun ornament die. Now you could add stamped images onto this, you could do whatever you want. However, I'll be using this basic ornament die along with other layered ornament die sets that are designed to coordinate, but you could definitely just use this alone if you prefer. For this first card, I'll be using the Birch Press Marisol ornament die set. There are 3 dies included in the set. They can be used separately or layered together in different ways, and you can see the 3 dies across the top. I die cut these from 3 shades of green cardstock and I'm gluing them together. And I also have a solid white ornament die cut on the back, and that's from the basic ornament set. So you can see this beautiful layered die. If you wanted to, you could do another layer of layered die cuts on the other side, and then you would have this beautiful paper ornament that someone could keep as a keepsake. If you're interested in including an ornament keepsake that you make out of paper on a card, I will link to a video that I did last year with a similar design. So be sure to check that out here at the top right or in my description below. But today in this video, I'm using the ornaments to create a fun surprise gatefold card design. Now to create the gatefold card, I start with a piece of cardstock that is 5.5 by 8.5. From both ends, I will score at 2 1/8 of an inch. So you can see here 2 1/8 of an inch. I'll show you another version you can do later in this video. Now along these score lines, I'm just going to reinforce the fold, folding the 2 ends to meet together in the middle. This is a great way to create a basic gatefold card design. Now I thought on this example that I would use an embossing folder on the front of my card. So for this, I am going to do an embossing folder from Memory Box. This is the Gracious Leaves, and I will use the embossing folder on the 2 little flaps on the front. This is my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cut machine, but you can use any machine that you may have. For this particular embossing folder, I used a metal shim, an adapter shim, the embossing folder with the cardstock, and then I just run it through without a cutting plate. And this happens to give the right amount of pressure for this 3D embossing folder. So there you can see the beautiful impression that we get. Now I'm going to do the same with the other flap. So notice I am lining up that crease there with the edge of my embossing folder. So just the 2 end flaps will end up with the impression. Any embossing folder would work for this, as would any die cut machine. And there you have the beautiful texture on the flaps. Along with that, I'm using the Birch Press Simple Joys die. This has the shadow for the word joy and then the word joy itself. I die cut 2 of the shadow from white cardstock, and then I die cut the letters joy from white cardstock and gold glitter cardstock. I glued all of these together for a layered dimensional look. For the top of my ornament, I used the topper from the Ornament Basics die set I showed you at the beginning of this video. And I used a gold mirror cardstock, so it would have some shine. After I've assembled my ornament, it's time to do the gatefold surprise feature. For this, I need 2 little hinges that will hide behind our decorated ornament and the ornament that will be behind it. For this, I need a piece of cardstock that isn't as tall as our piece that we're going to have the surprise in, which is this ornament. So this is shorter than our ornament. Doesn't matter how long it is. You'll see that in a moment. I'm scoring 1/4 of an inch in from both ends. So here you'll see me do the scores at 1/4 of an inch. Then I'll reinforce those fold lines. So basically I have a piece of cardstock here that has 2 small folds at the end. Next, I'll use my trimmer to cut these to be smaller. So I just found it easier to score a bigger piece, but you could have definitely cut 2 smaller pieces and scored down the middle. Basically, these end up being a 1/2 inch wide with a score line down the center at 1/4 of an inch. And these are about 1.5 inches tall. So there you can see my 2 little hinges. This size can definitely vary depending on how big your piece is for the front of the card. In my case, it's this ornament. On one side of one of my hinges, I'm putting some strong adhesive. You could use strong liquid or double-sided tape. And I'm putting the folded edge right against the edge of our gatefold. So the folded edge is lined up with the gatefold edge. And I'm doing the same with the other one. Strong adhesive on it, lining up the folded edge with the edge of our gatefold. So here you can see my 2 folded edges are butt up against each other when the card is closed. So we end up with like these 2 handles on a refrigerator door to allow this to open up easily. Again, the size of this hinge really doesn't matter. It just needs to be able to be hidden by the shape that you add to the front of the card. Now on the left-hand side, on the top of the flap, I'm putting strong adhesive once again. So I put strong Gina Liquid Connect adhesive. And now I'm centering on top of that our ornament. So the only adhesive is on the top of the flap on the left side of our card. And that's all that's holding that ornament in place. So the ornament is kind of floating there, only attached to the hinge. Now it's time to create our simple ornament with our message. That is part of the surprise gatefold design. That's the white ornament there. I'm using Hero Art's Holiday Messages stamp set. This is an older one that I reach for often. I will die cut a white ornament from the basic ornament die set that I showed you earlier, and we'll stamp a sentiment on that. I have a sticky mat here that I've cut to fit inside of my Misty stamping tool to hold this ornament in place as we stamp our sentiment, and I'll link to the sticky mat that I use below. I'm lining up my sentiment, closing the door on my Misty, and my white ornament will stay in place as we stamp on it. I stamped that with the dark green ink, and now I'm putting adhesive on the other hinge. We'll glue this white ornament onto this hinge. I want it to line up hidden behind the joy. So this is what I do. I hold it back to back with the other ornament. Then I close that ornament down onto the hinge. And now when the card is closed, these line up. So the green fancy ornament is attached to the hinge on the left flap of the card, and the white simple ornament with the sentiment is attached to the hinge on the right side of the card. So now you can see the surprise gatefold feature. When it's closed, it looks like this, but then it opens to reveal the other ornament with the sentiment on it. And you could decorate that other ornament however you wanted to. Last but not least, I created a bow out of some ribbon that I had in my stash. And I put a dot of liquid adhesive, and now I'm putting my self-closing tweezers on it to hold it in place as it dries. It pinches it there. Once it's dry, we have that nice ribbon right at the top of our ornament. So here's the completed card. You can see the texture from the embossing folder on the background of our light green note card. And then it looks like when the card is closed that there's only this one ornament. But when you go to open it, you'll see that we have the surprise white ornament, which I simply put a sentiment on. And again, you could decorate it however you want. There's plenty of room to write a message on the inside, and it does stand for display very nicely. So this is just one example. I'm going to show you several more. Most of them are ornaments, but keep in mind, you could just use a circle die or maybe a Christmas tree or a star, anything you want for the surprise gatefold design. Let's do another example with an ornament, but this time I'm incorporating a background die onto the gatefold too. Here's another of the new Birch Press ornament die sets. This is Twinkle, and you can see how all the different dies layer together nicely. Now, I do use these ornament layering dies quite a bit. I make a lot of paper ornaments to add as tags to gifts for like teachers and such, and I include them on cards often, which again, I'll link to the video showing that. So for me, I really put these dies to use, but you can definitely use other dies if you wanted. Now for the background of this ornament and the star in the center, I use silver foil paper. This is from the Memory Box polished foil paper pad. This nice thing about this is it's thinner, so it's great for die cutting, and it doesn't get fingerprints. There's even this white opal. It's hard to see in the video, but it's gorgeous. And then there are other colors included. I use the silver on this one, but I'll definitely be using that blue in the future. Now I also die cut from some bright blue cardstock here, some of the little dies that are included in the basics ornament set that I showed you before. So you can even add layers using those little dies from the basic ornament set to these layered ornament die sets. And then I added a little silver topper too. So that's like the focal point of the card. The rest of it's very simple. Again, I'm starting with a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 inch cardstock for my gatefold card, and I scored 2 1/8 of an inch from each edge. Now I'm folding those in and reinforcing the fold lines, and the two ends of the cardstock will meet in the middle to create the gatefold. Now I have the Birch Press string art die. I've been wanting to use this one for a long time now. I die cut it from a light gray cardstock, and then I'm cutting it in half right down the middle, so I can glue half onto one side of the gatefold and half onto the other. This is such a beautiful background die, and I thought it would be fun to incorporate onto the surprise gatefold card design. Now off screen, I sprayed on the back of this with liquid adhesive. I used E6000 spray adhesive, and I'm adding the left-hand side of the die cut to the left-hand side of my card. With intricate dies like this, I like to use spray adhesive. I find it's the easiest way to get a good amount of adhesive on the back of those detailed areas. Now it's time to create the hinges. So I have a piece of white cardstock here, and I'm scoring this time 1/2 of an inch from each end, and then I'm cutting them at 1 inch. So basically I have 2 hinges here that are 1 inch wide with a scored line down the center. It doesn't really matter how tall, just want to make sure it's smaller than your main focal point, which is the ornament in this case. I put adhesive on the back side of one of my hinges, and I glued that to the left flap so that the score or folded line is lined up with the edge of that flap. And I'll do the same on the right side, so the two score lines end up touching each other in the center. So this looks like the handles, once again, of fridge doors. All right, now it's time to add our ornament. I did add a silver bow on the top of that. I'm putting liquid adhesive on the top of the flap on the left, and then I'll close up my card and place my ornament center and press that down. Be sure to use a strong adhesive here. I would use either strong double-sided tape or strong liquid adhesive. And now we need the ornament that will be part of the surprise that is attached to the other flap. For that, I used the basic ornament die set and cut it from pool cardstock, and white heat embossed a sentiment from that Holiday Messages Hero Art stamp set that I showed you earlier. This time I put adhesive on the flap, lining up the ornament with the other. Then I close the card onto it, and that will cause that blue ornament, the light blue one with the sentiment, to be attached to the right flap. So now we have these two ornaments that line up with each other, so when they're closed, you only see the decorative one on the front. So I decided to skip putting a sentiment on the front of this card. I usually put a sentiment on the front, but this was so ornate I thought it was best to leave it. You can see the foil cardstock showing through, and I also added some Trinity Stamp silver baubles to the ornament for some extra accent. So there you can see how the card opens up, and you can see the simple ornament that's hidden behind it. Again, you could decorate that ornament as much as you want. You could do layering, you could do stamping, whatever. I like to put a simple sentiment to just kind of give a surprise when the person opens it. Let's do one more ornament surprise gatefold card. This time it's a landscape instead of a portrait design. So it opens up sideways, so it's a shorter and wider card. This time I'm using the Birch Press Bella Ornament Layering Die Set. And this I think is the most ornate of the different layering designs. And you can see it also cuts the oval and the scalloped oval that you see on the left. So this time, my main piece is going to be the ornament, and then the hidden surprise piece that comes out is going to be that oval piece. There are many different ways you can layer these together. You could use only 2 layers or 1 layer if you wanted, but I decided to go with all the different layers. So there you can see the different pieces this creates. Okay, for this card design, I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 11 inches, which is half of the piece of a cardstock. I'm scoring 2 3/4 of an inch from both ends. So 2 3/4 of an inch from this side, and then I'll rotate it and do the same from this side. I will then reinforce those folds and they'll meet in the center. I'm also using the Poppy Holly background die. This is a new die that I am crazy about. It's so beautiful, and I die cut it from gold glitter cardstock. I then cut it in half right down the middle so I can glue it to the 2 flaps of our gatefold card design. Once again, I used the E6000 spray adhesive because I thought that was the easiest way to put adhesive on the back of this and to add it to the card. And you can see how the two halves fit in the center. I had a little part break off when I was die cutting, so I'll just glue that on with liquid adhesive instead. So you can add any kind of background here. You could do die cutting, embossing folder like we did on the first example, stenciling, die cuts, anything. By the way, I wanted to show you the glitter paper that I'm using today. It's from Memory Box. This is the Holiday Glitter Paper Pad. So you can see all the different holiday colors in here. I like that there are a few shades of gold or silver or champagne color. So you can find just what you want to use on your project. So here's a little comparison. Just wanted to compare the different colors in case anybody was interested in knowing. I found that these die cut beautifully, and I used one of the silver sheets earlier in this video, and now I'm using the champagne color for this card for the holly background. One of the nice things about this glitter paper, in addition to it die cutting easily, is that it really doesn't rub off. There is also another new glitter paper from Memory Box. This is the frosted glitter paper. So if you like a little texture and a bit of shine, but don't want it to be too loud and shiny, this is a good option. It's not as ostentatious, I guess you would say. It has this frosted look to it, and there's all these beautiful colors. The black is my favorite. I think it's beautiful, and I'll use it later in this video. But I just wanted to show this because I had a few people ask about the frosted glitter paper, and I'll use it again in a future video. Back to the ornament, I used the layer dies to cut 3 additional ovals, and I'm gluing 2 in the center from white cardstock just for some dimension. And then I'm adding a peach one on top where I white heat emboss Peace from the Hero Art stamp set that I showed you earlier. However, I decided that I wanted a more bold peace word on that. So I used the Altenew Peaceful Wreath stamp set. This is an older one I've used before, and that bold piece there I thought was perfect. So I switched it and white heat embossed that onto a peach oval, and I'll just glue this on top of my other piece oval, and nobody will ever know that I changed my mind. That's something that I do often with crafting. I just think if you're not happy with something, instead of starting over, just cover it up. For the surprise portion of this Gatefold card, I used the Hero Arts Piece and Stamp die set. So this actually comes with the word peace as a die also. This is just the stamp set. And I used the Goodwill Toward All that's in the bottom of the set. I white heat embossed that onto a peach oval and then added that to a darker peach scallop oval from the ornament dies. To create the hinges for this, I have white cardstock and I scored a 1/2 inch from each end, reinforcing that with my bone folder. And then I just used my scissors to cut these. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody sees the hinges. One of these hinges I will have to cut down in size because the surprise portion of my gatefold is that oval, which is smaller. So I just cut that in half. So I have 2 hinges here that are 2 different sizes. So on the left part of my card, I will glue the hinge. That's right here, the bigger one. Put adhesive on that. Put the folded edge right against the gatefold. Press that down until it dries, and then I will put the other hinge on the other side. Adhesive on the smaller hinge, put that right against the folded edge so the 2 folded edges meet in the center. Now this one I needed to cut a little bit smaller, so I just cut the edges off. Again, nobody's going to see that. Okay, so now we can glue the ornament onto the bigger hinge, putting adhesive on that and centering my ornament right down the center of the card. Press that down, and now we'll put adhesive onto the other flap, the smaller one or the smaller hinge, and glue our oval onto that. So this time I'm just going to center it up right there in the center. That will hide nicely behind our ornament. So on my other examples, my hidden sentiment was on an ornament. This time it's on a different shape. I added a few pearls to the background and a jute bow to the top of it. You can see the silver glitter cardstock peeking through the little openings on the ornament. And that goes nicely with the glitter background die cut that we have. So this example shows that whatever die cut shape you use on the left flap doesn't have to be the same as the one on the right. You just want the one on the right to be a bit smaller or the same size. So you can see how this stands really nicely on display. There are many creative ways you can use this design. I'm actually considering this as my holiday card this year. So I would do the ornament on the front, and then instead of the oval with the sentiment, I would do a little family photo. Okay, so here is one that's non-holiday, just a general hello theme. And when you open it up, you can see the Thinking of You surprise. Now, since I'm a big fan of layering dies, I decided to use background layering dies for this card example. This set of 3 dies is fantastic. I think you can buy these individually too. So one die creates these holes and those pierced dots in the design in the background. Then we have the outline that can be layered together with that. And then there is a third layer that you can put in there or just use any combination of 2. I decided to use the 2 that I just showed you. But layering dies, I will say, are an investment. I mean, these are big pieces of metal, so they have a higher price point. So you want to make sure that you have many ways to use them, and I've done many videos on using layering dies creatively, and I'll link to some of those below. For this card, I decided to use 2 of these layers with white cardstock because I love the look of layering dies all in white. I glued the 2 layers together, and now I'm cutting them right down the center so I can add them to a gatefold card. I wanted to show you, if you take a background of layered die cuts and cut them down the middle, you can use them in different ways. You can orient them differently, you could use a border, anything you want. Well, today I'm going to do my gatefold card once again. I have a 5.5 by 8.5 inch piece, scoring 2 1/8 of an inch from both sides, just like I did in my earlier examples. Now I'm putting glue on the back of my layered piece that I cut in half, gluing 1/2 to the left flap and 1/2 to the right flap. So you could do stamping here, embossing, anything you want. I love the layered background dies. For the focal point, I'm also using the Birch Press Coral layer dies, so you can see the 3 dies there at the top. I die cut them from different colors of pool cardstock, and I'm gluing them together. This is a great die to cut different petals from. You can make a flower, you can do many things. Love the detail of it. One of the things that I particularly like about Birch Press, Memory Box, and Poppy Stamps is they design their dies to go together. So the Cora layered dies I just showed you go nicely with these vivid bloomed stitched dies. Now this set has a bunch of different sizes of this bloom with the stitching, and they match up nicely with the coral layer dies. So you can use them together or separately. I'll use them again in future videos. I used one of these dies to cut from pool cardstock and glued it to the back of my layered die cut. I also used this Hello die from Birch Press. It's a big Lingo Hello die set, which I've used before. I cut the shadow die from white cardstock, and then the individual letters from the black frosted glitter paper that I showed you earlier, and glued those together. Next, I created the 2 little hinges, as I've done many times in this video. Again, it really doesn't matter the color or the size. You just want 2 hinges to hide behind your die cuts. For my surprise sentiment, I used Thinking of You from the Hero Art Lake Time Fun stamp set. You could use absolutely any sentiment that you want. I white heat embossed that on one of the Vivid Blooms die cuts, as you can see there on the right. After I've glued my 2 hinges in place, as I've done many times in this video, it's time to add our 2 die cut elements. This time I'm starting with the surprise one. So I'm starting on the right hand side, putting glue on the little flap, and now I'm centering this. This die cut was easy to center. I could have done this on all the other examples, started with this one first, but I didn't think of it. Now I'm going to put it kind of tucked behind the left flap, put adhesive on my little hinge, and glue this one on. So I can be sure that the die cuts are right behind each other so that when it's closed, the surprise one is hidden. Okay, so now we have the card completed. Now I'll tell you, I decided not to use the black glitter cardstock. So I took my black glitter cardstock letters off and just replaced them with dark blue. I felt the black stood out a bit too much and was too distracting. So again, another case of me kind of changing my mind but not giving up on the card design. I also added some little gemstones here and there just to add some sparkle. I love the layering in the background and on that center element. There you can see the fun surprise gatefold design. Plenty of room to write that sentiment on the inside, and then also it stands up for display nicely also. So I hope all of these examples demonstrate that you can do this fun gatefold surprise design with any different type of dies. I use layering dies because I love them, but you could use basic shape dies if you prefer. You could do stamping on your die cuts, anything you want. I hope this encourages you to give this design a try. I have linked all of my supplies in the YouTube description below. along with the other videos that I mentioned. I linked a couple of those also here in the middle so you can check them out easily. Thanks so much for spending this time with me. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again soon.